Hi there, I'm Christine Dabar from speechmodification.com, and this is my Smart American Accent training. Welcome to our Friday live question and answer class. We always talk about an American accent topic, pronunciation, intonation, how to improve your accent in our Friday class, and you're welcome to ask your questions at any time. Please type them in the chat and I'll answer them. I welcome your videos and in class because it helps me know how best to help you improve your American accent. In today's class, we'll be talking about your native language and how it affects how you hear and speak American English. So I have some videos talking about how our native language acts as a filter in our brain for sounds. We're going to go into some details about that. Of course, I'm going to take your questions as I always do. And today I'm going to also include some a special sneak preview. Tonight I'm premiering my 500th YouTube video. So this video right now, this live video, is my 499th YouTube video, and I wanted to celebrate reaching 500 videos. So tonight at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we'll have that preview. I'm going to give you more details about that later in the class, but I hope you can come back and join me for that. We'll be chatting live during that preview as well this evening. If you're new, welcome. If you're watching on Facebook, please feel free to continue watching on Facebook, or you can switch over to the YouTube broadcast if you'd like to be part of class and ask questions. For those of you who haven't yet subscribed to the channel, if you'd like to be notified when we have our live classes, it's a good idea to subscribe and you click on the bell for notifications. And then every time I upload a new video or hold a live class, you'll be notified. So that's a great way to join in. So today, let's get to our topic. I'd like to talk about our native language and how it affects our second languages, including American English, when we're trying to work on our American English accent. So when we learn our first language, part of what we learn when we learn to communicate in that language is a sound system for the language. Our brain, as a little baby, can hear sounds from all different languages and interpret them and understand them. But as we grow and develop and are exposed to our first language, the sounds of that language take shape in our brain. And so we hear and interpret those sounds correctly, and that enables us to speak our first language. As we learn additional languages, depending on the age we are when we hear them, for most people, we're hearing those additional languages through the filter of our first language. So how does this look? Basically, when I have a sound system in my brain for my first language, and then I hear an additional language, there are places where those sounds are the same and they line up. I understand and hear the sounds in the new language correctly. Then there's places where I have sounds, where there are sounds in the new language that I don't have in my accent filter, in my personal sound system. And I can begin to hear and interpret them, listen to them in the new language, but sometimes those sounds are very similar to sounds in my language, and so I hear them through the filter of my language, and I hear them as a different sound. This is partly where our accent error patterns come from. We are using sounds from our native language instead of the American English sounds. We talk about this a lot in my videos about vowels and in my classes about vowels, because there are those vowel sounds in American English, many vowel sounds that you don't have in your native language. For example, recently we had a class about the vowel a, as in black cat. It's an open, lax front vowel, a, and in many languages, they might have more of an ah, a back vowel, or a more closed vowel, or an a vowel. And so this is something that can be very helpful to understand in terms of how to use it when you're listening to English. Hello, nice to see you. So let me show you some visuals that will help you. I'd like to show you how, for example, let's look at Spanish. This is a good example. So this is just the vowel sounds for Spanish, not all of the sounds of Spanish, but the vowel sounds of Spanish are these vowels here. So we have the E, the E, the A, the U, and the O. Now, excuse my Spanish, I have an accent if I try to speak Spanish. I'm not saying the vowel sounds exactly correctly because my filter, which is the American English vowels, affects how I pronounce those vowels and how I hear those vowels. So we can look and see there are more vowels in American English. We've looked at that quite a bit. If I look at the vowel systems together and I put the Spanish vowels right on top of the American English vowels, I can see some places where it lines up nicely, like the E is the same in both languages, or the U is the same. Other places, for example, like I was talking about the vowel A, they don't have that vowel in Spanish. In Spanish, the A is closer to our A, it's further back in the mouth. And so Spanish speakers will hear these two vowels as their Spanish vowel, and they will often produce these two vowels as their Spanish vowel. Sometimes that doesn't matter so much. Other times it sounds accented. It can cause misunderstandings and communication differences. So there's an example of a vowel in English that isn't in Spanish. Another example, here the vowel E in Spanish is one vowel sound, E. This is the vowel in American English that's in words like name and say. But in American English, we actually have two vowels there. We glide from the A to the I. So I say, say, and a Spanish speaker might just use their native Spanish vowel. They might say, say. Because we don't have that vowel by itself in English, when I hear that, or when an American listener hears that, they might hear it as though you're saying this vowel here, the red tent vowel. So you're trying to say, you don't say this extra sound that we do in English. You say, say. Americans will hear it as se. 3 different vowels going on there. Everybody's filter is affecting what they're hearing. It's affecting what they're producing. And so it's not only your accent errors or differences that affect your accent, it's also the listeners. So if you have American listeners or international listeners who are more used to different sounds from different sound systems, they might be better at hearing and understanding your accent. Or people who have had less exposure to foreign languages, to international speakers, may have a less expansive filter for their sound system and may have more difficulty. So that's one area. Vowels certainly are highly affected. There are also other sounds in English, consonant sounds, that you might not have in your native language or that might be different in your native language. So for example, the American R sound, we make with a back R. So I say words like red, very, ever, and in all of those sounds, my R is produced in the back of the mouth. You might have an R in your language that's produced more in the front of the mouth. You might tend to say red or very. And so that difference of position may affect how you hear and how you speak as well. So you might have an R, but it's actually a different sound. Or, for example, the TH sound, you might have a different sound for TH rather than using a V or a Th. You might have more of a Th or a T with a more of a stopped sound instead of a continuing sound. So all of these specific patterns you can see when you're looking at my videos about pronunciation, about specific words, about specific patterns. But overall, in general, I want to teach you today about how the sounds you don't have in your language affect how you speak. The sounds that you have in your language but are a little bit different affect how you speak and how you hear. And then in addition, there are patterns that you might not have in your language. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but I see that there's some questions, so I'm going to take a pause. So question, is the D silent when you pronounce the word secondly? Also, can you say the word particularly? Thanks in advance. Okay. So particularly is a challenging word for me as well. I'll say it slowly. Particularly, because it goes back and forth between the R's and the L's. The L's are in the front, the R's are in the back. I hope that helps, particularly. And then in your first question, when you pronounce the word secondly, the D is not actually silent in that word, but I don't make a clear aspirated D. I don't say secondly. There's no break between the D and the L. So basically that's what's called a stopped D. If I said second, second, you can hear that I release that D sound, second. But when I say secondly, instead of releasing the D, secondly, and bringing my tongue back up for the L, I go right from the D sound, secondly, into the L sound. So my tongue does not release, and therefore you don't hear the release of the D. And so I'm making a D, but I'm not releasing it. It's called a stopped D. We do the same thing with the T sound at the ends of words for many words in American English. Rather than saying hot and releasing the T, letting the air come out, hot, I say hot. I go up to make the T, but then I don't release it. So secondly, I don't release it because I'm moving into the ly. If I said hotly, it would be the same thing. Hot, hotly, I move right from the tongue position for the T or for the D into the L. Very good question, good observation. Please feel free to ask additional questions as we go on. I'll go back to what I was talking about with the accent filters. So we have sounds we don't have in our native language. We have sounds that are different in our native language. And she's following up with a question, or he, I'm not sure, SB, says, what if I just say secondly, secondly? That's an okay kind of cheat, but listen to the difference if I leave the D out entirely. Secondly or secondly, secondly, secondly. For some people, maybe you're not going to hear that difference, and it's okay to say secondly with just the N. An American will say secondly, secondly, where they're making that stop D in there. So it kind of depends on perfectionism you're looking for in terms of your American accent. Leaving it out is a kind of an easy fix and will pretty much sound the same. So yes, that's an option for sure. Pascal wants to know how to say overthink, overthink. So you're probably looking at that R to TH transition. You can always build it from the back by just saying think and then overthink, overthink. Pretty much I have to, I can't really glide very easily from the to the TH. So overthink, I'm going to really be saying both of those sounds, just trying to move without a break, much of a break between those two. All right, so the third aspect about our native language and how it affects how we speak and hear American English is that there are patterns in American English that you may not have in your native language. So one example of this is that in a lot of American English words, we end the word with a voiced sound. So ends with a D, that has my voice. Was has my voice. Sound has a D. It's very typical for a lot of other languages not to have voiced consonants at the end, or only to have specific consonants at the end. Again, I'll use Spanish as an example. A Spanish word will often end in a vowel or not in a V or a B or a D or a G or a Z, those voiced sounds. And so we have a tendency to devoice those. We don't hear that voicing very easily. When I say was, you might hear it as was with the S sound. When you draw your attention to it, as I do in my classes and in my videos, you will be able to hear those and begin to use those differences. But because you don't have that pattern of voiced sounds in your language, you don't use that pattern when you're speaking American English. Another example of these types of patterns are clusters. So very frequently, again, at the ends of words, consonant sounds. So just like I said, ends has an N and a D and a Z sound. Ends. If your language doesn't put multiple consonants together at the end, then you might have a tendency to drop them off. So you might say more like ends or N or end. One or more of the sounds can be missing. So we have sounds you don't have in your native language, sounds that are different in your native language, and patterns that you don't have in your native language, all affecting how you're hearing and how you're speaking in American English. All right, a bunch of questions have come in. I'll pause there. Do you pronounce the word freeze as freeze? Yes, so both freeze, she's asking, if you're not seeing the chat, she's asking about freeze like he frees the caged animal, and freeze like the water freezes. So both of these, freeze and freeze end with the Z sound, and everything else is the same. So the IPA would be an F, R, the E vowel, and the Z. So I can look in the dictionary, and for both of these words, I'll see this same descriptor. So really helpful for knowing if something has a voiced sound, a Z or an S at the end, is looking it up and seeing the IPA, because the Z symbol will always say the Z sound. Good question. How to pronounce the word and of. So Michael wants to know, how do I pronounce and how do I pronounce of? Both of these have vowel schwa, which is the sound. And that's actually going to be coming up later when I'm telling you about my premiere. I'm going to tell you about a new American accent challenge, and the first video in the challenge will be about vowel schwa, so be sure to tune into that to get more information. So and of are both very frequently used words that are often mispronounced. Of, the errors I hear are that people will use more of an O instead of that schwa sound. And they might say an F because there is the letter F, but it's really a voiced V sound. So that should sound more like of. And the word like a book, a talk, a lesson, should be just And the error I hear there is that people will say a because they see the letter A. They'll say a letter or a book. Americans will say a letter, a book. That's the correct pronunciation for both of those. You can find more about that in my vowel schwa video, and I also have videos both about the sound of and the sound of, because they're such commonly used words and they're commonly mispronounced. You can also see in my Say This, Not That playlist a description like I just did for both of those words, and also quite a few additional words where spelling, like the letter sound, might mislead you into mispronouncing the word. So check that out on the Say This, Not That playlist. You can find that on my channel page. I also suggest that if you're looking for, please do ask me the questions, but if you're watching this as later, or if you've just discovered my channel, you can use the search tool on my channel page and type in your word or your question or your vowel, and the videos I have for that will come up. You can also find them on my website, speechmodification.com. It's a great place to ask your questions. So I'll demonstrate that for you later. And if you're watching the replay of this video, please feel free to put your question in the comments, because I do always return to those and answer the question to tell you where you can find those answers. Okay, great. So good question about and of. Next question. It's very challenging when a word ends with the NG sound, as in doing. Is it a nasal sound? Yes. So the NG sound is one of three nasals. We have where my mouth is sealing off the air entirely. We have where my mouth is sealing off the air with my tongue behind my teeth. That's the letter N usually. And then the letters NG, where I'm sealing off with the back of my tongue lifting. So doing and going are also nasal sounds. That's very good. Good question. One thing that might help you with pronouncing the NG sound, besides using my videos for that, is to try the word think. In the word think, even though it's spelled with NK, it actually has that NG sound. So I don't say think. There's not an N in think. This sound here is the NG. So this is the IPA for think. And most people will pronounce this correctly. They will be saying think with an NG, because saying think is much harder. So you can try saying the word think, and then try saying the word thing, which is the exact same as think, just minus that sound. So think, thing. You should feel the back of your tongue sealing off in the back of your mouth. Great question, Pascal. Pascal also wants to know, what are the tense forms of freeze? Freeze, frozen, etc. So I freeze, I froze, I have frozen. Yes. Hello, Mohammed. SB wants to know, can native speakers mispronounce when pronouncing unvoiced and voiced plurals? Yes. So native speakers will typically do that correctly. They likely do not know the rules. They just pronounce them correctly because it's their native language. When I'm, as a native speaker, saying things like books or ends or worlds, I'm definitely using a voiced sound, but I may be under the impression that I'm using an S because it's spelled with an S, and I don't really notice that difference. And we're definitely not saying walking around saying pens with a very long, extended, clearly voiced sound. I might say the pens are in my hand. There are blue pens. Especially when I end with a voiced plural, like there are 4 blue pens. Pens. It may sound somewhat devoiced. I start with the Z, pens, and then I end up kind of on an S, pens. But when I say the pens are in my hand, the pens are in my hand, I'm linking the word pens and the word are, and I'm always using that strong Z, the pens are. And so when you point that out to a native speaker, then they realize what they're doing. They typically don't make an error, but there is a little bit of devoicing in general on those voiced plurals, voiced end sounds. That's a great observation. Good question. Thank you for all the great questions today. Another question: do you pronounce wire and wire the same way? So she wants to know, or he, why are the contraction, why are we going, versus I have a wire to plug in. They're basically the same. When I'm saying why are we going, I have a tendency to make it almost sound like 2 syllables. Why are you doing that? Wire. So it's more of a wire, whereas when I'm talking about a wire, I wanted to hold up a wire for you, a wire hanger, for example, I'm probably saying it more quickly. It's definitely got the same sounds in both cases. But if I'm using the contraction, I might have a tendency to hold that and drag it out a little longer. Why are you talking about wires? Whereas when I'm just saying the W-I-R-E, I'm going to say it with a shorter duration, most likely. Pascal wants to know, does it happen that native speakers roll the R in the word through? I kind of hear them doing that in the TV show Friends when they talk very quickly. Through. Native speakers don't roll their R's in any case, unless they're putting on a British accent. But probably what you're hearing through is that in that word, because I'm going to an oo from the TH and the R, and so I have to go TH forward, R back, and then oo mouth position forward. There's kind of a through. There's kind of an of schwa in there as I'm gliding between sounds. And so you're hearing a slight difference between the word through and maybe some other THR word. But no, native speakers don't roll their R's. Many people can't roll their R's when they're trying to speak. Americans, when they're speaking languages where they should be rolling their R's, that's an accent error pattern that they have in other languages. So good question. Thank you. Okay, so we talked about our native language and how it affects, and it can be very helpful to understand the sound system. For example, what vowel sounds you have, what consonant sounds you have as compared to English. I've done the research for you so that you don't have to do that, and put together some accent overviews that show you the typical accent patterns, the typical accent errors that you'll have when speaking English based on your native language. Now, you won't have exactly everything because everyone has different experiences in their personal filter, what they hear, the exposure to English that they've had. But it's a very good starting place to recognize what's happening in your accent. And those are available for free on my website, on speechmodification.com. I'm going to put the link here for it in the chat so you can go there and get yours if you haven't already. And I'll just show you when you go to the website where it's free downloads. Look here, finding out what's happening in your native language. If you go there and your native language is not there, drop me a quick email and let me know, and I'll do the research for you and let you know what's happening in your language as well. I also suggest that on my free practice site, so if you go here to free practice and you click on online practice free trial, you'll see a lot of resources for you. including you can look up your language here in the categories. So say, for example, you're speak an Indian English language, then you can go and it'll bring up for you the patterns that you have and resources that are especially useful for Indian English speakers. Or, for example, Spanish speakers. I'm going to show you yours. And for some of the languages, including Spanish and Mandarin and a few other languages, what I've done is given you not only all of the patterns that you have, but your top patterns. So a Spanish speaker can look and see, okay, here's my top 5 error patterns that I'm going to have. Here's online courses that I can check into. Here's additional practice materials and more information about training that's very specific to me, a Spanish speaker. So I hope that you'll take advantage of those free resources. You can also, on my channel page, Speech Modification in Seattle on YouTube, search in the search box there, and you'll find language-specific information that I hopefully you will find helpful as well. It's really good to take a look at what is more specific to your speech so that you're not overwhelmed by all of the different things happening in American English. There are many, many things that you're pronouncing correctly, and your accent and your native language really do affect which error patterns you should be working on, you should be paying attention to. And there's probably many that you're already aware of, and maybe there's a few that you weren't aware of because of the way that filter affects how you're hearing. So when you hear yourself speaking and others speaking, you don't hear the difference, but you can learn to change that filter to be able to hear the difference. Okay, Delvani says the sound has the same sound like the G sound. Actually, no, it doesn't. So the sound in the word thing doesn't have a G sound. And one of the accent error patterns that people tend to have is that they see a G and they think they should say a G. So they might say this word as thing. And really, they should be saying it as thing. So that is represented like this in the IPA. The difference would be, like I showed you before with think, that one has, it's a K and not a G, but you can hear the difference if I say thing, there's no release. I leave my tongue up there, thing, in the NG position, and I don't let it release. If I let it release, think or thing, it sounds different. And so we want to watch out that when we have an NG sound, like doing, singing, etc., that I stop my voice before I release my tongue. If I leave my voice on, singing, then those little extra G sounds that I don't want sneak in on me. You can see more about how to do that in my video about American NG. That's a very typically challenging sound to make correctly until you get used to that feeling of holding the without releasing into a G or a K. Very good. Thank you for the comment and the question. I want to tell you a little bit about some things that are coming up. So particularly about my 500th video, which is going to be released tonight. The premiere is at 8 p.m. Pacific time. And if you can't catch that because you're somewhere else in the world and it's too early or too late for you, you can watch the replay. But if you're available tonight to come to the premiere, you can join live. I'll be there taking questions, commenting in the chat, and we're going to look at the 500th video together. So here's the link for the watch page. You can set a reminder and be notified when that's about to go live at 8 p.m. And in that video, I'm going to be introducing a new accent challenge, which is Speech Modification's American Sounds Challenge. And that new challenge is going to be starting right away on Saturday morning with the first video. And in those videos, for each video, I'll be talking about one of the sounds of American English. So like today, we were talking about the NG sound, or often we talk about vowels, TH sounds. I'm going to go through every single sound in American English and give you information about it. So talking about the accent error patterns we might have, how to correctly pronounce the sound, common words that it's in, and how to take those sounds to improve your pronunciation and your American accent. Those are going to be live classes. I'll take your questions during those classes, and so you're welcome to come and ask questions. In the first class, we'll be talking about vowel schwa, the sound. So today we had some questions about the words of and Those both have the vowel schwa. We're starting with that because it's the most common sound in English. And then in our second class, which will be next Monday, I'm going to be talking about the flap T, which is the sound in the middle of words like water and little. So those will be quick classes with your questions, with great information, and I hope that you'll join me for that challenge. Finish this year and start the new year with some great lessons about the American accent. You can use my videos to learn about these patterns and sounds, and also I have online classes, and I teach one-to-one in group classes here in Seattle, so check those out on my website, speechmodification.com. If you're just starting off and you're interested in an online class, I recommend my 6-week class because it's a great introduction to the fundamentals. And that class is really focused, here's the link for that. You can get a free trial of that on the website. That class is really focused on the patterns that affect the most languages. So Pascal was asking about the rolled R. We were talking about the vowel schwa, the American TH. All of those sounds and patterns are covered in the 6-week class because they affect so many different languages. Your native language, you're going to be having those accent challenges when you're speaking English. And it's a great way to learn the SMART method for speech training, speech pathology from speech modification. And it really focuses in on the words and phrases that we say the most, so it's efficient and effective. Okay, so I'd like to give you a quick tip. We always include that in our live classes, something you can use right away to improve your American English. And today's quick tip is number 1, go to my website, speechmodification.com, and download your native language overview. And then secondly, I suggest that you record yourself speaking, and then you listen to the recording to see if you can hear some of the patterns that you see on your overview. So when you're looking at the overview, you may see that instead of a TH sound, your language has a tendency to do a T sound. Record yourself just talking about any topic, then listen and have that in mind. Listen for those THs. Can you hear whether you're saying think and with, or does it sound more like think and wit? And once you have those patterns in mind and you're listening to your own speech, you can then begin the process of determining which patterns you have and how to change them. If you'd like more help with knowing about your accent patterns, please feel free to email me or write a comment, and I'll direct you to where you can find information about your native language. I also do offer a free speech screening on so you can send me a recording and I'll listen to your specific speech and tell you what's going on there, give you some help and giving you some starting points for using my training and using my videos to improve. So next week we'll have our short challenge classes, both on Saturday and a second class on Monday. And then we'll also continue to have our Friday question and answer classes, which are going to be longer questions. This coming Friday, class to answer questions from the 30-day challenge. So we'll be talking about a mishmash of topics, summarizing the first American sounds that we talked about. And so I hope that you can be there for that class, as well as tonight for our premiere of our 500th video. Thanks for being a great class today. If you have any additional questions that I didn't get to, please feel free to ask those now or put them in the comments for later and I'll come back to them. It's been a great class. You've had some really great questions, and I enjoyed having you here in class today. Thanks so much. I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com. I'm going to stop myself. There's a question. Yes, for Mandarin speakers, I have an accent overview on the website that will help you. I also have the top 5 error patterns for Mandarin speakers, so check that out on speechmodification.com. And if you need a link, then I can put that in the comments for you as well. But that's definitely one of the accent patterns that we deal with the most here in the US. There's a lot of native Mandarin speakers. Thanks so much. I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com. Remember, if you want to sound American, you can do it. speechmodification.com.